It was the evening of June 4th, 1942, and Japan's Kido Butai was on the brink of collapse. Hiryu, the sole surviving Japanese carrier, stood as the final hope for Admiral Yamaguchi and the remnants of Nagumo's fleet. With only a handful of planes and pilots left, Yamaguchi ordered a desperate strike, determined to retaliate against the relentless American forces. However, unbeknownst to him, 24 American dive bombers from the Enterprise approached, hidden by the sunlight in their backs. Japan's last surviving carrier was about to have to fight for her life. By early afternoon on June 4th, the Yorktown was a smoldering wreck, scarred by bombs and torpedoes, and her crew forced into the sea. However, the Japanese too had sustained irreplaceable losses, losing 3 aircraft carriers and many more aircraft. Just one of their carriers, the Hiryū, had escaped the initial carrier strikes by hiding under cloud cover. The surviving American carriers, Enterprise and Hornet, scrambled to take in Yorktown's scattered air groups. Chaos reigned as planes diverted, fuel ran low, and crews fought to regroup. At 14:45, clarity arrived. Lieutenant Samuel Adams of Yorktown's Scouting 5, flying beyond his assigned sector through intermittent fog, sighted the Japanese force: 1 carrier, 2 battleships, 3 heavy cruisers, and 4 destroyers, just 110 miles away. This was the Hiryu with its escorts, Japan's last surviving carrier, which had escaped the carnage earlier. On landing, US reconnaissance pilots pressed Spruance to act swiftly, reporting a 4th undamaged Japanese carrier to the north. However, Spruance hesitated, considering the risks. Losses of the US air groups during the initial attacks had been severe. The torpedo squadrons were decimated. Success now rested entirely on the reliable Dauntless dive bombers. The Enterprise was left with 25 operational dive bombers, strengthened by 14 planes from Max Leslie's Yorktown squadron, which had sought refuge there. The Hornet, largely unengaged earlier, retained 21 dive bombers. In total, Spruance had over 40 dive bombers available. When more reports trickled in, confirming the Japanese carrier's location, Spruance was swayed. He launched 24 SBD dive bombers from Enterprise at 15:30. Half an hour later, Hornet added another 16 Dauntlesses to the mission. Aboard Hiryu, Admiral Taman Yamaguchi prepared for one final desperate strike. Scraping together the remnants of the striking force, he ordered 5 Vals, 5 Kates, and 10 Zeros to prepare for launch. This meager force, all that remained of Nagumo's once dominant air fleet, was the last hope for striking a decisive blow against the Americans. As Hiryu readied her planes, the 24 SBD dive bombers arrived undetected. The strike force from the Enterprise sighted the Kido Butai just before 1700. Lieutenant Commander Gallagher, leading the group, climbed to 19,000 feet and maneuvered westward to attack with the sun at their backs. The low-hanging sun obscured their approach. The Japanese combat air patrol, consisting of a handful of Zeros, failed to spot the incoming threat until the American planes were already committed to their dives. Though surprised, the Japanese defenses reacted swiftly. The Hiryu's gunners quickly responded, lighting up the twilight sky with bursts of anti-aircraft fire from both sides of the carrier. All Allied planes focused on the Hiryu. Gallagher initiated his dive just as the Hiryu began a sharp turn to port. The maneuver forced Gallagher to adjust his attack mid-dive. Pulling up abruptly as he released his bomb, he attempted to compensate for the carrier's evasive movement, hoping to land his payload on the retreating ship. His bomb fell astern, missing its target. The strain of his abrupt pullout wrenched his back so severely that upon returning to the Enterprise, he had to be lifted out of his cockpit. Realizing the urgency of eliminating the last operational Japanese carrier, Lieutenant Wilbur Gus Shumway abandoned his initial mission of targeting battleships and redirected his squadron toward Hiryu. His attack coincided with a separate 4-plane section led by Lieutenant Commander Dick Best, leading to brief confusion as both groups dove toward the same target. As Best adjusted his approach, Japanese Zeros seized the moment, intercepting his flight and shooting down one of his wingmen, Ensign Fred Weber. The planes dove on the Hiryu's starboard bow while another group targeted the port side. The attacks were devastating. Ensign Richard Jacquard struck first, his 500-pound bomb obliterating the forward elevator, hurling debris skyward before it slammed back against the Hiryū's small island structure. 3 more bombs followed in quick succession, including another from Best, his second successful hit of the day. Dusty Kleiss, already credited with a direct hit on the cargo earlier that morning, scored again, delivering a punishing blow to the Hiryu. The combined impact of the 4 bombs created a catastrophic wound in the Hiryū's forward section. The flight deck, where aircraft were being armed and fueled for the next mission, was shredded, leaving a gaping chasm. Explosions ripped through the carrier, igniting a massive fire that consumed her from bow to stern. Flames erupted in sheets, engulfing the ship and rendering further operations impossible. Damage control crews frantically tried to douse the fires. However, Hiryū was ablaze and beyond repair. Though the Hiryū suffered less secondary damage than the other carriers due to a lack of munitions on her hangar deck, the destruction inflicted on her primary structure rendered her beyond salvage. Shortly after these successful hits, Hornet's squadron of 14 dive bombers arrived. The pilots instantly saw the Hiryū was beyond saving, and instead decided to direct their efforts against the heavy cruisers Chikuma and Tonets. Despite the pilots' reports of several successful hits, supposedly 3 on a battleship and 2 on a heavy cruiser, none of their bombs actually found their marks. Shortly thereafter, a flight of 12 Army B-17s from Midway and Barking Sands Airfield appeared overhead. The bombers, arriving just before dusk, unloaded over 3,500-pound bombs onto the remnants of the Kido Butai. Like the Navy dive bombers before them, they scored no hits, but returned to base claiming the destruction of a carrier and the sinking of a destroyer. Despite the devastating American attacks that had left her burning and heavily damaged, Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi still clung to the hope of salvaging her. Throughout the night, exhausted damage control teams worked desperately to contain the fires and keep the ship afloat. However, just after midnight, a massive internal explosion shook the carrier. The situation was now clearly beyond saving. At 2 a.m., Yamaguchi gathered the surviving crew members on the flight deck, assembling them aft, near the gaping holes left by the American bombs. Addressing his men, he took full responsibility for the loss of Hiryū, but ordered the 700 survivors to live and fight another day, to form the backbone of a reborn Imperial Navy. Facing west toward Japan, they lowered the flag as the national anthem played, ending with 3 banzai cheers. Then, at 3:15 a.m., he gave the final order to abandon ship. While most of the crew evacuated, Yamaguchi chose to stay behind. Several of his staff officers asked to join him, but he refused, insisting they must live on. However, Hiryū's captain, Tomeo Kaku, requested permission to remain, and Yamaguchi accepted. The 2 men stood together on what remained of the bridge, watching the orderly evacuation below. As dawn approached, they admired the bright moon, waiting for the inevitable. At 5:10 a.m., with the sun rising, Commander Fujita Izamu of the destroyer Makigumo was given the grim task of sinking Hiryū with torpedoes. The first Type 93 long-lance torpedo ran under the hull without detonating. A second struck home and exploded. As Makigumo steamed away, some of her crew reported seeing figures still standing on Hiryū, possibly survivors who had chosen to go down with the ship. Assuming they had made a patriotic decision, Makigumo did not return for them. However, although it was in a desperate condition, the Hiryū was made of sterner stuff, and the torpedoes did not sink her. At dawn, on June 6th, a Japanese scout plane from the carrier Hosho spotted the crippled Hiryū still afloat, contradicting earlier reports that she had sunk. The plane's crew even saw surviving sailors waving from the deck. The report reached Admiral Yamamoto, who, displeased, ordered the destroyer Tanikaze to locate the carrier, rescue any survivors, and ensure her destruction. Meanwhile, aboard Task Force 16, Admiral Spruance received conflicting reports about enemy ships near Midway. Though he had over 60 bombers ready, he hesitated, prioritizing enemy carriers over battleships. A report at 8 a.m. confirmed a disabled Japanese carrier northwest of his position, Hiryū. Spruance decided to attack, but faced disagreements over the strike's execution. His air chief, Browning, insisted on launching immediately with 1,000-pound bombs, despite pilots' concerns about fuel range. Commander Wade McCluskey, recovering from wounds, intervened, persuading Spruance to delay an hour. He advised against using 1,000-pound bombs for the planned attack on Hiryū due to fuel efficiency concerns. The dauntless SBD dive bombers had already stretched their range in previous attacks, and McCluskey knew firsthand how dangerous fuel shortages could be. Many of his own pilots had run out of gas after attacking the Kaga and Akagi the day before. The additional weight of a 1,000-pound bomb significantly reduced fuel efficiency, making a 270-mile strike even riskier. McCluskey also suspected that, given Hiryū's crippled state, 500-pound bombs would be more than sufficient to finish her off. His experience and pragmatic judgment ultimately convinced Admiral Spruance to overrule Browning and adjust the bomb loads, ensuring the pilots had a better chance of returning safely. Unbeknownst to the Americans, Hiryū sank at 9 a.m. before their planes launched. She finally slipped beneath the waves early the following morning at around 9 o'clock, taking 383 crewmen with her. After flying more than 300 miles in search of Hiryū, Spruance's strike force, 65 dive bombers from Enterprise and Hornet, failed to locate their target. Instead, around 6:20 p.m., they spotted a lone Japanese destroyer, later identified as Tanikaze. Given that it was the only visible enemy vessel, the Americans decided to attack. Tanikaze's captain, Katsumi Tomoe, immediately recognized the severity of his situation. Facing an overwhelming force, he warned his crew over the ship's loudspeaker to prepare to die with dignity. Despite this grim outlook, he was determined to resist and executed extreme evasive maneuvers, ordering his helmsman to zigzag unpredictably at full speed. Lookouts leaned out of the bridge windows, tracking the dive bombers and calling out attack directions to help the ship dodge incoming bombs. The American pilots, eager for action, dived one after another in rapid succession, some descending so low that Tanikaze's lookouts could see their goggles and white scarves. Yet, despite the destroyer being their only target, all 65 bombs missed. Only one near miss, dropped by Lieutenant Abby Tucker, damaged Tanikaze's hull near the waterline, but the ship remained operational. American pilot Sam Adams and his gunner Joseph Carroll were shot down by the destroyer's anti-aircraft fire. With fuel reserves dwindling and nightfall approaching, the American pilots now faced the challenge of returning to their carriers in darkness. To aid their navigation, Spruance made a rare and risky decision. He ordered Enterprise and Hornet to turn on their searchlights, pointing them skyward as beacons despite the danger of attracting Japanese submarines. By 8 p.m., most aircraft had landed safely, though a few mistakenly touched down on the wrong carriers. Only Adams's plane failed to return. Meanwhile, Spruance, now skeptical of Hornet's leadership under Admiral Mitchell, noted that some of its planes had disregarded his orders and flown off with 1,000-pound bombs anyway. With his strike force back aboard, Spruance chose to keep Task Force 16 on a cautious westerly course through the night, wary of potential engagements with Japanese battleships. The loss of Hiryū marked the end of Japan's offensive capability in the battle. With all 4 of Nagumo's carriers destroyed, the once mighty carrier striking force was reduced to a fragmented, battered fleet. The sinking of the Japanese aircraft carrier Hiryū was not confirmed until June 19th, nearly 2 weeks after the Battle of Midway. Before the carrier went down, around 40 survivors managed to evacuate in a cutter stocked with supplies. They remained adrift, hoping for rescue by the Japanese Navy. However, a PBY patrol aircraft from Midway eventually spotted them, leading to their capture by the US submarine tender USS Ballard. It was only at this point that Admiral Spruance and the US Navy definitively learned of Hiryū's fate. As darkness fell, the American carrier strike groups began recovering their planes. With all aircraft safely aboard by nightfall, Admiral Spruance contacted Admiral Fletcher for orders. Fletcher, preoccupied with a battered Yorktown which was close to sinking, deferred, granting Spruance the autonomy to make his own operational decisions. Through the night, the flames of the shattered Kido Butai lit the Pacific. Yamamoto, unwilling to concede defeat, weighed the risk of a night battle. But Spruance kept his distance, unwilling to be lured into the unknown. By dawn, the Japanese retreat was well underway. June 5th passed in tense silence. Search planes scoured the empty sea, but no enemy was found. Then, at first light on June 6th, a lone scout from Enterprise glimpsed something through the haze. The sighting report was garbled, first a battle cruiser, then a carrier, but something was out there, moving west. Spruance ordered confirmation. At 7:30, the reports came in. Enemy ships, damaged, but still afloat. Whatever had survived the previous days was now within reach. By 8 o'clock, Hornet's bombers were airborne. The chase was not over. Thank you for watching this video. Please leave a like. It really helps out the channel. If there is a topic, battle, or person you would like to know more about, let me know your thoughts in a comment. I would also like to thank all my patrons and channel members for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and you want to support my work, consider joining me on Patreon. For just $1 per month, you will gain early access to all my videos without any in-video advertisements. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.